Chapter 8. Just like my parents said would happen, I was learning a lot, being thrown into the culture. As warm May transformed into rainy, muggy June, I learned and learned. Just maybe not always the things my parents thought I would. Like one morning when I walked to school, I stopped in front of a place with a large sign in front that read Pachinko. I couldn't tear my eyes away at the men dropping plastic discs at the top of what looked like an upright pinball machine. Plink, plink, plink went the discs as they bounced off pegs until they found their way to the slots at the bottom. I asked Reiko if she'd ever been inside one of those pachinko places before. Reiko responded with a shocked, "What? No, I would never." "Why not?" I asked. "It looks like fun." "Oh, Waka," Reiko shook her head. Only she didn't seem exasperated with me like Obasama sometimes did. She seemed more amused. Her explanations were always kind. She spent the rest of our walk to school describing the shady nature of these places, and that if I ever went to one, all the teachers at the school would be shocked, and that they'd tell me my grand and that they'd tell my grandmother and my aunts, who would also be shocked, and there would be meetings about how young girls should never set foot inside places that seemed as harmless as these. I found this description of how everyone would freak out almost as fascinating as the pachinko parlor itself. So that's one thing I learned, that pachinko parlors were evil and young girls should never go inside one, no matter how much fun they seemed. I also learned that not only was I taller here, but I was faster too. In PE back in Kansas, I was one of the fastest girls in the class, second only to Jenny C. If Paige P were in my class, I was second to her too. Toward the end of the year, Angie W suddenly got a lot faster. Okay, so maybe I wasn't always the second fastest girl in class. Depending on who was in my class, I was third, sometimes fourth fastest girl in the class. On an off day, the fifth. In contrast, I felt like an Olympic champion when I ran here. The first time our class raced, I finished second out of all 40 students, and second only to a boy. "Wow," exclaimed Emmy-chan, "why are you so fast? What did you eat in America?" I thought about what food I hadn't eaten here that I ate a lot of back home. Steak. My classmates went bananas. "Steak? Steak? You're so lucky. How often do you get to eat steak? No wonder you're so fast." Steak was my older brother's favorite dinner. My parents thought he was too skinny, so my mom made sure we ate steak once a week. "Yum." My brother greeted his steak every week. "Again," I groaned. My mother tried to make it different by disguising it in different marinades. Wishbone Italian dressing was the worst. When we had steak, my dad always said, "Kansas beef is the best." I hadn't missed it at all since arriving in Japan. Only with my classmates' comments did I realize maybe steak was a luxury, even if they were just chuck steaks. For my parents, even the cheap cuts were better than any beef they ate growing up. So I learned maybe I should be grateful for all those steaks that made me so big and fast. I also learned my mom was right when she said I was really behind in my kanji. During language arts, my classmates read aloud, one right after the other, straight down the rows. Through this class routine, I learned who was a good reader and who was not. Tall and reserved Fujita-san was always ready with the correct answer when asked, and never received a head slap. Clearly, she was one of the smartest girls in class. Midori-chan's friend Yamashita-san struggled, though, and she always played with the ends of her ponytail when it was her turn to read. "Yamashita," Mr. Adachi would yell, "focus!" That made Yamashita-san stop fidgeting with her ponytail, but it didn't help her read any better. For now, I wasn't nervous as my turn approached. Mr. Adachi already told me that he'd skip me, at least until I caught up, and who knew when that would happen, if ever. Sure enough, when the student behind me finished, there was a brief pause. In the silence, I thought I felt my classmates' glares as I held my breath. Or did I? Maybe I was being paranoid. Still, when Mr. Adachi pointed to the kid in front of me and she started reading, I exhaled. Skip. Reading was a doozy. So much of a doozy that I didn't even attempt it, except during my tutoring sessions with Mr. Adachi. Writing was worse. Take, for instance, the kanji for study. If you look at the first character for study, ben, it takes 10 strokes to write it. To write it the correct way, we had to follow the kakijun, or stroke order for each character. If we didn't write the strokes in the correct order, it was wrong, even if it looked right. It was hard for me to memorize these kanji, so I made up little stories about them. For instance, one kanji looked a little bit like an alien with a hat holding a chair with one of its legs. But if I drew the chair part of the character before the alien wearing a hat part of the character, it was wrong. Even though Mr. Adachi didn't watch me write the characters in the quizzes, he knew when I wrote the strokes out of order. When I showed Reiko some kanji I wrote, she agreed. Oh yeah, I can tell you wrote the strokes out of order. You can? How? I asked. You can just tell. It's shaped funny. Can't you see the difference? I could not. On my first kanji quiz, I scored a 2 out of 10. Buzzcut Suzuki-kun caught sight of my quiz before I could hide it. He nudged his henchman, scrawny Ito-kun. Baka waka, they laughed. Sweat broke out across my forehead when I heard them. I felt sick and embarrassed and mad all at once. Baka, stupid. None of my American classmates ever called me stupid. In fact, I was most definitely a brain. I only had 2 B's the whole time I've been in school, a B+ in handwriting in 3rd grade, and a B in 5th grade science. The rest were A's. In 6th grade, Mrs. Davenport didn't give kanji quizzes, but we did have vocabulary and spelling tests that were easy peasy for me. At one point, Mrs. Davenport had me find my own spelling words and then stop me when I only quizzed myself on words like Quetzalcoatl. It's nice that you're challenging yourself, but it's not like you're going to use Quetzalcoatl many times in your life. Mrs. Davenport added words like embarrassed and receipt to my list and said, I was disgruntled at the time, but she was right. My ability to spell Quetzalcoatl had not come in handy yet. Certainly not here. So what if I happen to be good at remembering a sequence of letters to spell English words? Spelling in Japanese is not a thing, since words are spelled out basically how they sound. School here is all about kanji and remembering a dash here, a line there, and what order to put them in. And I'm really, really bad at it. I thought about my classmates back home, who always were the first to sit down in our class spelling bees. I had never considered what that felt like until now. So I haven't learned much kanji, but I have learned I'm not very good at it. That's okay. I was crushing it at PE. What's going on? I asked one day when we walked into the gymnasium filled with small wooden platforms. This? Responded Midori-chan. Don't you have tabibako in America? I shook my head. You're lucky, Midori-chan sighed. I do not like these at all. Turns out tabibako was like leapfrogging, except not leapfrog like in the US, more like competitive leapfrogging. First, we leapfrogged over the lower wooden tobibako vaulting horses, but then we stacked them higher and higher until they were about chest high. One at a time, we ran at them as fast as we could, launched off a springboard, pushed our hands off the upper part of the horse, and vaulted over with our legs apart. For a split second, it was like flying. It was awesome. Are you sure you haven't done this before? Naomi-chan came back from her 3rd try running at the highest tobibako, balking and then lining up for yet another try. Then we had leapfrog races in teams of 2. Hey Waka, want to be my partner? Asked Fujita-san. No, Fujita-san, she should be my partner. We're closer in height, countered Emi-chan. I'm not very good at these, but, started Midori-chan. I'll be your partner, Midori-chan, exclaimed Naomi-chan. I looked back and forth between Fujita-san and Emi-chan. Come on, Waka-chan, we'll beat all the boys. Emi-chan's eyes twinkled and her freckles danced. I glanced over at the boys, who looked like they were conspiring right back at us. All right, I nodded to Emi-chan. Let's go. Emi-chan looked toward Fujita-san. She smiled and shouted. Sounds good, just defeat those boys. Ready, set, yoi, don! We not only won it, it wasn't even close. I can't believe you boys, shouted Mr. Adachi. Only he didn't seem mad. He seemed amused. These girls ran circles around you weaklings. Emi-chan and I grinned. You mean leapfrogged? Grumbled Ito-kun. Mr. Adachi's playful teasing stopped as he strode over to Ito-kun and smack. In America, I was scrappy because I tried hard, but I was small. In basketball, the taller girls stuffed the basketball in my face when I took a shot, and in Red Rover, my classmates always ran right at me. In Japan, I was a jock. Maybe a dumb jock, but I didn't mind. People like jocks. Back home, people got way more excited about kids who could score points and win races than kids who could spell Quetzalcoatl. I learned that the same was true here. If my friends could see me now.